Hi, everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the tier list for 13.9. So, as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream, usually starting around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, going till about midnight, maybe 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. It's a very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. And let's go ahead and get in here. So, and be sure to check out as well, I did a video earlier last week detailing some of the new items that are coming up, and obviously I'll do a much more detailed video once we get the final version of that. But I think the tier list will shake up quite a bit the next patch a little bit. I still suspect Rakan's going to be pretty strong, but there are some other options that could be good too. Okay, so conspicuous, elephant in the room here, Rakan S tier, and I think there's such a huge difference. This is the first time in a long time that I think he's in his own tier. Like, I just don't even think there's anyone comparable to Rakan right now if you're practiced on him. And, obviously I am biased as a Rakan one trick to some extent, but this is the strongest I think I've ever seen him across, like, all ELO brackets. He has been good in Pro for a long time, and I think he's been good for one tricks. I would say probably the best one trick with maybe Thresh historically as far as supports go. But at least the last time I looked, and let's see if that's changed, not much. If you look at high-end play, right, he's at MSI right now. He's the most picked support, and it's not even close. He's got 11 picks, 84% presence. So he's picked and banned 84% of the time. Still has a 55% win rate, which means people are picking him and banning him into any matchup. It just doesn't even matter a lot of times. And so he's, I would say, the most successful one with that kind of pick rate. I mean, Thresh does have a pretty good win rate too in Pro. And then if you look at solo queue, he's the third most picked support, or actually third highest PDI, pick ban influence, sixth most picked overall. Still almost has a 53% win rate, which is higher than most other champs here, except for maybe Melio. But you have to keep the context in mind. He's very difficult to play for a lot of people. He doesn't have a ton of skill shots. You have the W, but it's the decisions on how you sequence your abilities and how you approach different fights is what can make him challenging to, I guess, fully optimize. Because he is safe, so he's not in danger of dying, so that's not what's difficult about him as far as like ganks and vision control. But it's just trying to choose, okay, do I open with my W and then R? Do I R and then W? Do I R and then shield onto someone and then W? Or do I R, W, and then shield? There's so many different opportunities, and you have to dodge a lot of skill shots because instead of just being, a projectile hook, your CC is actually you basically going in, like, and headbutting them effectively. You have to be on top of them. So that makes you a lot more vulnerable to things, line skill shots, like Lux Q, Morgana Q, all that kind of stuff. So often, if you're going in with your R, you have to either flash that, or you have to be ready for it and then flash it, or you have to juke it. So you have to, like, strafe to the side and dodge a skill shot in order to go in with your W. Because a lot of people will either hold their skill shot to stun you for when you go in, or they'll hold their mobility to juke out of your W, which does have a slight delay on it. So he's hard to optimize. I would say he's the second hardest support probably to play at a fairly high level, other than maybe Thresh. So he's hard to play, but he still has a high win rate. So that just means that he's really good. There's a lot of, like, newer players or players that aren't seasoned Rakan veterans playing him and finding success on him right now. So I think that he does benefit pretty heavily from playing a bunch of games on him, but I think he's also accessible right now with how strong he is. So why is he so strong right now? Why is he so much better than everything else? Well, part of it is they really shored up the weakest part of his game a few patches ago, which was kind of early game. Particular early game poke. He's one of the best at dealing with that, especially for engaged champions like Nautilus and Leona. They don't have any sustain in their kit. They're very vulnerable to getting poked out. So you can all in with those champs to try to counter poke, But if you're facing down, if you have like a short range ADC on your team and you're facing down like double poke, So if you've got Vayne or Kaisa, something like that on your team, and the enemy team, has like Jin Lux or, Senna, Caitlyn, those types of things, you're just going to be for a really bad time. Now, Rakan's not amazing into that stuff, but because you can hit these Qs more often, they cost less mana, the cooldown is lower, and the heal is up. That gives you a lot more sustain than in the past, and it also allows you to heal your partner for a lot more than you had in the past. So that's really good on him. And just the way the meta is shaking out, and it's been this way for a little while, movement speed is at a very high premium because a lot of tanky or bruisery types of champs are very good right now in almost every position in the game. So that heavily favors Shirelia's, and I think he's the best Shirelia's user in the game because he personally loves movement speed a lot because, again, oftentimes you're having to juke and sort of navigate your way around CC and team fights. Several of his abilities kind of scale based on his movement speed. His R and his W scale really well with movement speed. And it allows your team to run in and follow up on your engage really easily in ways that maybe they couldn't in the past. Also, the way that your shield is designed, you can cast 2 shields within 4 seconds, which means you basically get a double benefit out of the Motivate passive because the cooldown on it is 4 seconds. I think the shield's a 5-second cooldown in between. Or you have 5 seconds to use both charges. So you can double motivate people. Also, he uses AP extremely well. I think his W is like a 0.8, maybe a 0.7. They may have lowered it a little bit. But it's a really nice AP ratio. And then his shield is, I believe, a 0.7 each. So it's a 1.4 total. And a lot of other enchanters have been nerfed too. So, Janna's shield, I think, is like a 160 or something base. Rakan's shield is also 150 base. So it's almost the same as Janna's shield these days. Back in the day, Janna's shield used to be like 240, and then they lowered it to like 230 and 220, and now it's down to like 170 or something, and Rakan's has pretty much always been 150. So because a lot of the other enchanters have been nerfed, that means his shield is a lot stronger by comparison. If you're thinking about protecting somebody, you can run Guardian with him very comfortably. So he's extremely good at peeling people as well with your R, plus shielding onto someone is a big shield. It's going to automatically, charm them typically. You can knock them up. You can do Shirelia's to help your team kite back. So he's very good at peeling, and he's also very good at engaging. So you're just kind of ready for every situation. As Rakan, you use arguably the best enchanter item in the game, or the best support item in the game. Use it better than almost anybody else. And you have lots of options for your other items. But typically, you can also use Knight's Vow extremely well. And this was another low-key thing that not a lot of people talked about. But Knight's Vow, getting that extra 10 ability haste is massive. Because Rakan really, really wants ability haste. And again, a lot of the enchanter items have been nerfed such that their ability haste is garbage. Or non-existent. Right? Like Ardent Censer, Staff of Flowing Water, those don't have baseline ability haste. Staff does give you a little bit off of the active. But, those items aren't as good as they used to be. And Knight's Vow also fits that theme of protecting your ally, right? It's 10% all the time protection. And then if they are really injured, then it's 20%. So you've got your shield, double shield with good AP ratios. You've got Guardian. You have the ability to just pretty much charm highly mobile champs that are trying to dash around like Zed and things like that on your ADC. And it's just perfect. And there aren't that many champs that can comfortably use Shirelia's and Knight's Vow in the same build to have that level of flexibility. But he really loves Knights also because he needs that health, because if he does get CC'd, he can get blown up. And because you have to run close to everybody to do your shielding and do your R and stuff like that, you're going to get hit by AoE. You're going to get hit by things sometimes. So having that health is really nice. So this excellent combination of items. I think the changes on the next patch are also going to be fantastic for him because I think he will be able to use some of the enchanter items, but they're also buffing up a lot of the tank items. So I think it's going to be awesome. Just in general, that itemization change looks amazing. But Rakan especially will probably be good with it. So, yeah, he's just fantastic in terms of navigating fights. And one of the biggest things that I've been playing other supports lately, just trying them out on my Smurf as well. And the biggest thing is like your vision control is so good on Rakan. It's crazy because you can get out of almost anything, right? You can go place deep wards in their jungle. You can contest control wards. So you can place deep vision very safely, and you can punish people really hard for not respecting the vision. He's especially good at counter ganking. So if someone goes on your AD carry, because again, you can go in and completely turn the fight around with your huge shield, and then your guaranteed CC. Your W actually does pretty good damage for an enchanter too. So he's just fantastic at hiding in a bush. Your mid laner or a side laner or whatever is pushing, and then someone comes in to gank them, and then you just completely turn the fight around running out of a bush. So very, very good at baiting people, very good at punishing people for bad vision. So, man, it's just so different versus like if you try to go in and ward deep, even with like Nautilus and Leona, who are pretty good. If you get caught out, if the jungler's there or they collapse on you or whatever, you're not getting out. Rakan, it is still possible to die on Rakan, but if you're paying attention, it's really, really hard because your W is a free dash over any wall. And then if you have an ally within like 2 screen lengths of you, you can dash over a wall and then E back to an ally. If stuff really gets crazy, you can R and run away as well. So he's just really, really hard to lock down. And you're also super safe from ganks. So if they decide to turbo camp you, you can probably get out of almost anything and not die. So very safe, very good vision control, really good at counter ganking, roaming if you want to do that. And you can just turn fights around like so well later on in the game. If your ADC is just a turkey and they're just dying all the time, you can play around the jungler, right? You get really good vision, make some plays with your jungler, make some plays with your top laner. Because these items work really well and your kit just works really well with anybody. It's not specifically tied to the ADC. Shurelya's is great at running people down, ganking people. Knight's Vow is great to put on some of these bruiser champions that have really high stats or, have a lot of lifesteal or whatever. So it's just very flexible, very versatile. You can play around any of your threats. He's just head and shoulders above everybody else, I think, right now. So, and that's just been super reinforced by me playing these other champs. It's like, yes, I am way better on Rakan than I am on these other champs, but, man, it just... People knows this on stream. I try to be positive. I try to find some nice things I like about other champs, but every time I'm just like, man, I maybe could have won this game if I was playing Rakan if we lose the other games. So, part of it is I am spoiled on Rakan. I don't adjust to other things, right? So, like, I have a hard time adjusting, like, oh, I can't put a ward there sometimes when I'm playing Leona because I could get collapsed on. So, yeah, that's kind of a player error in my sense. That's true, but that just reinforces just how good Rakan is. So, player error for me not adjusting, but the fact that I have to adjust and, lower my vision game, be more cautious with my engages because I don't know where the jungler is or whatever, just speaks volumes to Rakan. Like, you can go in, engage. If your ADC doesn't follow up or whoever doesn't follow up, usually, like, it sucks, but it's not as big of a deal because you can just get back out. Or jungler just, like, rolls up, tries to counter gank you or whatever. Whenever you go in for an engage, you just E right back out. No big deal. Like, nobody else does that. If you go in with Nautilus or Leona, you're in most of the time. And if the fight goes south, you're dead. So, Rakan, very big deal, very strong champion right now. Okay. Nautilus, I think, is still really good as well. Now, he doesn't look as statistically strong as the other ones. He's not picked as much, has a lower win rate. So, this is just, I guess, structurally, I think he's nice. Another thing about engaged champs in general, so this is Rakan, but this is also going to apply to the next 3 picks, really, 3.5 picks, is that having engage on your team is really nice because it allows for extra sort of diversity in solo queue in team compositions. Particularly because a lot of people love to play carries. Not a lot of people like to play tanks, especially lower elos. So your team could lack engage if you don't have it in the support role, right? If you have like a Viego jungle and a Fiora top and a Zed mid or something, it's really hard to make that happen. But if you have engage, you can force fights. And the biggest thing with enchanters is like, it just feels like you're being held hostage in the game. That's what I feel like, because I can't, like, I'm sitting there watching. I can buff people, but I can't make them make the right engage. I can't make them punish people for being out of position, for going for CS that should be illegal, for going for vision, where they should not be able to get vision there. If we've got position on Dragon first and, the enemy support's coming over to ward it, if you're playing an engage, you can kill them. You can punish them for that. If you're playing Janna or Sona, yeah, you can hit them with some ability, but it's not going to be as devastating as engage champs. So that's why, these days especially, I really, really encourage people to play engage and just become more comfortable with making good engages. Because that's really what it comes down to. That's how you make a big difference in games. A lot of games, I feel, with support is you get good vision control, you know where you should be, and you get there first, and you make a play on the enemy. You punish their mistakes, right? Versus in the past, especially in like the Ardent Sensor meta, I thought stuff like Janna was pretty strong. You just kind of win the game based on stats, right? You just get good stat items, you survive, then you get into a 5v5 team fight, and you just give all these buffs to your allies, and you just kind of win by default. You're forcing them to make a play on you, or you just win. So I can understand the merits in that, and I think that can be good if you're near your peak elo. So if you've always been a silver player and you're in silver, I think that's good. But I don't know. I just feel like if you're able to train yourself to spot opportunities, then enchanters are going to give you better chances to capitalize on those opportunities. Also, tanks just have higher base stats, or a lot of champs, these tanky champs do, so they're just going to get free gold effectively, just more armor, more HP, more magic resist, and again, that helps a lot because you're poor as a support, and it's going to help you with vision later. If someone engages on you while you're trying to ward a bush and you're playing Leona, you might be able to turn it around, right? If your teammates are close enough and the enemy blows a lot of cooldowns on you, maybe you can turn around. But if you're playing like Sona and you get engaged on with vision control, it's really bad. And this is why a lot of pro players do not play most enchanters, is because the vision control is just really, really difficult, especially later on in the game. Lulu is an exception to that. She's almost always one who gets played because with very specific champions, she scales extremely well, right? She gives them a lot of extra attack speed, a lot of extra on-hit damage. So Lulu is kind of an exception to that. Annie is sort of a strange exception too, because she's sort of an enchanter, but she's sort of engage. You'll notice the vast majority of the time, unless it's very specific matchups, people are going to play engage in pro, and that's a big reason why. Okay, so Nautilus, in general, not a lot has changed there. I mean, his kit is just really good for engage. He's got his R is basically guaranteed to hit unless they have stopwatch or something. It's gonna hit him. It can potentially knock up multiple people. Very little of his kit is going to be affected by tenacity as well. So like that knock-up is not going to be affected by Mercury Treads or other things, and that's really valuable. Obviously good for people who benefit from knock-ups, things like Samira, things like Yasuo. So that's nice. It's undodgeable. It's on a fairly low cooldown. It can knock up multiple people. You have a huge hook. It's got a fat hitbox. Very easy to hit. It is a displacement as well, so that's handy. They did give him a lot of magic damage and like AP ratios. I've always kind of wondered if AP Nautilus could be a thing, but I still think it's a bait to get AP on him. Anyways, I guess the stun, after the knockup, the stun is reduced by tenacity, so you do get some benefit. Versus Nautilus, you still want to get mercs, but at least it's not some of its knockups, unlike someone like Leona, where, almost none of its knockups. So he's okay. Like, the big thing with Nautilus, though, is when he goes in, he's probably staying in. You can kind of, like, he doesn't go as far in as Leona. He pulls them halfway, and you can kind of potentially walk back out and reset with your cooldowns. But His Q can't go through walls. It can't go through minions, so it's really hard to threaten people through minion waves with him. Versus Rakan can do anytime, anywhere with his W, and Leona can go through minion waves as well. Both of them can go over walls. Rakan can't do that, so it does have a fat hitbox open field, and you can use it to run away as well if it's off cooldown, your hook. But that is a major disadvantage, is the enemy can hide behind minions to some extent and block a lot of your skill shots. Also, if they have a tank on their team, then later on in the game, they can, body block your hook, and it can be somewhat difficult to get on their carry. So you can still use your R, and hit their back line. But, other stuff can body block the hook from you. So it's harder to get your CC chain on the back line. Versus Leona, if you hit your R, then you can E through everybody and just make sure you get the full CC chain on them. Similar with Rakan, you can run through people with your R and then W and make sure you get the full CC chain on the back line. So his backline access is kind of mixed. He's also a little bit squishier. Like, that shield is kind of wimpy. I mean, it goes up to 90 with 12% of your, I don't remember if it's bonus HP or total HP, but it's not a big shield. I feel like they should buff the shield a little bit. And your E is kind of wimpy as well. If you hit multiple waves on people, like, it can do decent damage in team fights. But it just feels like you can definitely get blown up as Nautilus when you're going in. And his base stats are deceptively a little bit lower than some of the other tanks. I think he starts at 37 armor. And I believe, like, Leona has 44, Braum has 44. So a lot of these other champs, it has 39 armor. So a lot of these other champs are just going to have more armor than he does. They might have higher health than he does. So he is very good. It's nice open field, good team fights, excellent roams. It's really that R, just the guarantee, like, they're dead. Every time you cast that, pretty much, on a skirmish or if you're ganking or whatever, they can't outplay it with mobility. Again, one of the only ways to deal with that is have, like, a Banshee's Veil or Edge of Night or Stopwatch. And if you Stopwatch, a lot of times that's going to line them up for a hook if you can time that right. So, anyways, Nautilus, pretty good. Standard items. I have, I think the Locket is kind of a bait. Like, the shield on Locket decays pretty quickly. I just don't think it offers a lot of benefits. Almost every champion that could get that, you'll see a trend where either Even Shroud or Radiant Virtue are going to be better picks. Radiant's going to be, like, way better next patch, I think, when it's not a mythic and it's a lot cheaper. I think they're taking it out of 27 or 2800. So stay tuned for that. But I like Even Shroud a lot. You have a lot of immobilization. Every time you auto attack, that counts as an immobilization. So you can pretty much permanently increase all the damage of your team by 10%. So this does help protect you a little bit with the shield. It can protect your team from different sorts of, big AoE hits, Ziggs bombs, Amumu ults, that type of stuff. But in general, this is going to help you do a lot more damage and potentially convert some of those ganks into kills a lot easier. So I would highly recommend going Even Shroud. So Nautilus, still really good. He can make the plays. He can punish. You just got to practice a little bit with him. Leona's another very strong engaged champion that I think is has the potential to be really really effective right now. Now, again, these are not going to be... Usually, engaged champs are lower win rate because I think they're harder to play than Enchanters, because if you make the wrong decision, you die, and that's bad. And you can bait your team into bad fights. So it's higher risk, higher reward, but again, if you're practicing it, getting better at it, the biggest thing is if you start noticing opportunities, you can take advantage of those opportunities. Like someone stepping up to try to hit a CS that they shouldn't try to hit, or someone who is, overextended pushing a side lane and you gank it with a jungler, or you get really good vision control and you engage on them over a wall. So again, I think you can just make opportunities and convert on those opportunities a lot better with tanks. But you will have the lower win rate because if you're just sitting around, not making proactive plays, or you're just A-ramming with your team, you are going to get outscaled by Sona. If everyone just kind of runs at each other in a 5v5, clean 5v5 team fights, in the mid to late game, you're going to get outscaled by Janna and Sona. So you have to get vision control and find opportunities to make picks. So you have to just kind of understand macro a little bit better to fully unlock their potential. But if you can do that, again, I think the ceiling is much higher. I think you have a lot more carry potential. So Leona's big reason you would play her, first of all, I think that her cooldowns are a lot lower, especially in the early game, than Nautilus and Rakan. So you can consistently keep going in and threatening people. So if they are out of position, Leona is probably one of the champs people would, like, if you told someone, they were racing the Challenger and they had to play a support, Leona would probably be on the short list, right, for Smurfs, because she can be super proactive early on. You can engage through the minion wave, really big CC chain. Her damage is pretty high. Her resilience is really good early on with her W, especially combined with Aftershock. She can dive super well in the early game because she gets so much extra armor. So incredibly strong. However, she is very risky, right? If you don't know when to engage, if you go into a bad situation, you are not getting out. There's no way. Like Nautilus, again, meets him kind of halfway, and he can root somebody and just like walk away if he needs to, maybe a little bit. You can kind of hook walls and maybe get away. It's still, you're probably not getting away as Nautilus, but it's like maybe. With Leona, no. You go in with your E, you're in, and that's it. But she can stick to people a lot easier because, again, her cooldowns are so low. Like that E, once you get points into it, once you get your ability haste, it's going to be like 5 seconds on the E, and then your Q is going to be like 3 seconds. So you can just almost permanently stun lock people late game. And her ultimate is on a very, very short cooldown. It's 90 seconds, which is crazy. So you can walk around and just consistently keep engaging on people. Now, it is hard countered by mobility. So she's going to have a really hard time against things like Ezreal. I mean, there's so many champs that have mobility these days. Anyone with Gale Force. But, if they have to use a flash or they have to use a Gale Force or something, this is going to be up again and you can make plays. It is sort of fast, so especially at lower elos, if you do this out of vision, like in a bush or something, people may not notice like the particle and react fast enough. So that is a thing. You can also try to just go in and hit your E first and then wait on them to use their mobility to try to get away from you and then use your R. So there are several different combos you can do. I will say all of her stuff is reduced by Mercury Treads though, and it is cleansable. So, that is going to be tough versus, instead of like Nautilus who has the knockup or Khan who has the knockup. So all of her stuff is just stuns. But does a lot of damage, can go through minions. So excellent to pair with like a Tristana, Draven, Jhin, just anything that can put down a lot of damage and just hard snowball in the lane. She's going to be very strong. So I think she is going to be pretty good. Again, in pro play, not looking so hot on some of these engaged champs, but I think the potential is there. Blitzcrank is another one, the ever-popular Eternal hard engage. The thing about Blitz is he is so all in on that one ability, right? You either hit your hook, and it's the most devastating hook in the game, I think, to hit, because it can go over walls, has massive range, massive hitbox, does really high base damage, and his whole kit does pretty high base damage, from the hook to your little knockup to your ultimate. He'll kill you, right? If you get Nautilus hooked, there's a really good chance you're going to die. So you just got to hit the hook, because everything else is worthless if you don't hit the hook. His entire kit is designed around you hitting the hook. So he does not peel that well. If you miss it, just the auto attacks off the W is pretty wimpy. Your little knockup is okay. That's some CC. It's still a little on the wimpy side. So he just really, really has to hit those hooks. Now, he's very good against Thresh, because Thresh stuns himself for like half a second whenever he tries to throw his hook, and Nautilus hook is instant. So if they hook each other, it's almost certain that Blitzcrank's going to win, because he has higher base stats and he just unloads a lot more damage than Thresh does in the early game. So some matchups are really good. Obviously, pulling Enchanters out of position, something like Janna. Janna can peel Leona, Nautilus, Rakan to some extent. She's not peeling Blitzcrank. If Blitzcrank hooks her, she's dead. Or hooks anybody else, she's going to have a really hard time peeling that. So he does have some really good matchups. Obviously, if they have immobile ADCs, Jinx is very popular right now. People like to greed out and go Kraken on Jinx. instead of Gale Force a lot of times. So she's just going to be a sitting duck if you can hit those hooks. Um, so he does have very, very favorable matchups if you land him. But some matchups are bad. His matchup against Rakan is usually atrocious because Rakan can dodge everything. However, if you can hit Rakan's partner, Rakan can't peel it as well, potentially. You can knock the shield off with your R. Um, so it's okay. Typically, you're going to get outscaled in team fights. So, Blitz is one of the ultimate champs, though, at, getting vision and then hard punishing people who are out of position. So if you're really good at getting good vision and hitting people out of bushes with those hooks, very strong. Okay, and then Thresh, he did get some buffs, I think, a few patches ago. He is back to, I believe, being the most popular support. He almost always is. If there's any way you can play Thresh, people love playing him. He's a very fun, interesting champ. Yeah, he's back on top. His win rate's okay. Quite a lot, too. Like 19%. And it just feels like he just kind of skill checks a lot of matchups. Sort of like Rakan. He's really versatile. He can peel, with his E. He can save people with Lantern. He can land those hooks. It is tricky to land those hooks. You have to practice a lot with Thresh because it does have that little half a second delay, and it's a really slender hitbox compared to like Nautilus hook or Blitzcrank hook. And his damage, I think, is lower. They did increase his damage quite a bit. On the E, I believe. They gave it like 40 more damage or something late game. So he's okay. The biggest thing about Thresh is he's really, really squishy in the early game for an engaged champ. He does scale if you get all of the souls. He does get decently tanky later on. I would say that a lot of the big tanks that get 3 armor per level are going to be able to keep up with him for quite a while. But you do get a little bit more armor, so that does kind of help. But you are squishy. I think you're the squishiest of a lot of the major tanks early, so you got to be careful with that. Especially if you go Glacial, which a lot of Threshes like to do. Just be careful, you will get evaporated in fights. So Aftershock helps a little bit if you want to go in more, but a lot of people are on kind of that Glacial train. And he doesn't offer that many buffs to allies, so his shielding is obviously going to be way weaker than like Rakan's shielding. I think he is coded as melee now. He was ranged for a while. I know they coded Rakan as melee, and that helped out with Relic Shield. I guess it doesn't matter anymore as far as like Knight's Vow goes. But he's okay. It's just the hook is harder to hit, and you have no access to the backline in late game team fights. Like, the best you can hope for is run up on him and maybe flash play. It's going to be very difficult. Versus like Nautilus, at least has his R that he can, typically hit the ADC with, or whoever's the most important threat on the back line. They can body block the hook, but he can hit the R. Thresh, they can body block the hook, and you just don't have anything else to try to get to the back line. So if they have any kind of front line and they're grouping up for a 5v5, the enemy's got like a Fed Jinx, you just lose. Probably. There's just no way you're getting on him. So he's okay. He's versatile, but not an amazing diver like Rakan. But there are just a lot of plays you can make with him. Really, really good gank assist. Probably one of the best gank assists if you get used to it, because you can lantern people in and hit your hooks to really close a lot of distance and pull your team in. So he can be very strong. Obviously, very high skill cap for a support. So you got to practice him to be proficient. And then Janna. Janna was the enchanter that I have really enjoyed the most. If I have to play an enchanter, I like Janna. Yes, she can't make a lot of proactive plays I was talking about, but she at least has really good vision control. That's something that a lot of people underestimate is, being able to get that deep vision in the enemy jungle and just set up plays, right? Just ping it, say, hey, they're going to go for their red in 20 seconds. Let's go gank them and kill their red. Clear out all their vision, and then just go in there with your jungler or your mid lane or whatever, make a play on the red. Or, again, just kind of establish vision around Baron. See when they're rotating to Baron, make a play, kill them. Same thing with Dragon. So vision control is supremely important. I think a lot of people really underestimate that. And Janna's one of the few enchanters that I think can do it well because she is squishy. So there's that. But with her Tornado, especially with Glacial Augment, you've got your just fast baseline movement speed with your W. And you've got your R if you really have to push people away. So with all but the greatest of chasers, Janna can get away if you encounter any resistance, trying to ward people in the jungle or trying to ward places in the jungle. And then she can also rotate really well between lanes because she does have that movement speed. So you do have like some pretty decent gank assist. I mean, not as brutal on things like Blitzcrank or Nautilus or Leona as far as like ganks go, but probably better than stuff like Lulu or Sona. Maybe. I don't know. Sona can rotate pretty fast too. But the biggest thing for me is just the vision control with her is good, and you do peel really well. So if you have, especially if you can duo with an ADC that's playing like a high scaling, high range ADC, like a Jinx type of champion, maybe if they're good on Aphelios, that type of stuff, then she can be really good. The problem, as with most enchanters, though, is it's really hard to make proactive plays, and if your team's just kind of falling apart everywhere on the map, it's really hard to get back in the game. So, she's the best of the enchanters, but again, I would probably rather be playing Engage in the current meta. We'll see next patch with some of the items they're coming up with. Maybe the stats are just going to be so strong that you have to play enchanters, but Melio is this one, if you're wondering. This just template doesn't have Melio. It's kind of older, but I don't want to build my own template out for these. So, Melio's okay. The thing, he does have a lot of aggression in the early game. He has good peel with the ball. It has quite a bit of damage, and just the interaction between Aerie and your W is just a lot of shields on a teammate when you're doing that. So it's really that interaction that's very abusable. So he does have quite a bit of damage in the early game. I think he falls off pretty hard late game. You do have the double shield potential. It does offer movement speed. Your R is good. If they have especially some kind of AoE CC like an Amumu ult or something, there are situations where he is good. So, and he does have a good win rate, and he is picked a lot. So I could see an argument where people want to put him high A tier. I mean, I could even see people putting him in S tier. I would not put him over Rakan, but I could definitely see people doing that. However, vision control's still going to be pretty bad. He does have movement speed to help him kind of get away, but he's very squishy. I guess he does have his Q to help peel, kind of like Janna's Tornado if you hit it, so maybe I'm underestimating him. That's totally possible. He's okay. Like, he's pretty good. If you're proficient on him, you can definitely climb. Annie, she has been nerfed. She is kind of in a unique spot, and I kind of like what they're doing, positioning her as a support. I think it's pretty cool, where she has the stun. She's got a point-click stun. She's got Tibbers for good late-game teamfight damage, taking towers, helping to take objectives, potentially. But she also has a pretty good shield with that damage reflection. Pretty good, amount on it. So, overall, fairly simple. Long auto-attack range, which is good with Aerie. Obviously, you've got your stun. She's a very unique support that I think is still pretty good. I wouldn't necessarily put her in S. I think she can get engaged on and blown up. Her base damages are somewhat low. Tibbers does add a lot to it once you get Tibbers, but you don't have the plants that Zyra has. You don't have the burn that Brand has. Now, I do have her higher than them because she does have the shield. I think she has more utility than they do. So, and I just don't think that she needs items quite as much as they do in order to be helpful. Also, really good with Shirellia is because she has that shield, and that's something that Zyra and Brand really can't comfortably use. So, she's pretty good. She's pretty good. Even though she has been nerfed, I think you can definitely win a lot of games with her. Now, Sona is someone that I had in S, but after playing Sona, man, she is so vulnerable to ganks. Her vision control is atrocious. But she does harass really well early on, especially against other enchanters. If you're matched up against Lulu or Janna or whatever, you can harass really well with your Q. Your heal is really expensive. So, like, the first 3 or 4 levels before you get it back, it feels pretty brutal. Once you get tier, though, you can start spamming it a little bit more, and it's a little bit less of a problem. But she is extremely vulnerable to all ends because, again, that baseline heal is really wimpy. It's been nerfed several times. But if you can get to Archangels, if you can get, usually Shirelia's or Moonstone, she does scale extremely well in clean 5v5 team fights, but she has a hard time making plays. You do have your ult, but limited playmaking opportunities, but really high scaling. So if you think your team is actually going to group up and be able to do 5v5s, if you, have a poke champion, you're going to be able to constantly push them in to Caitlyn or maybe Jinx, something like that. I think she's just a better version of something like Karma, where you have the pressure early, but you also scale later. So I think she's pretty good. And then Lulu is the last A tier, in my opinion. So she does scale extremely well with certain champions. She could definitely be S. So you put Lulu with Kog'Maw or a really good Twitch. Can be pretty good with Jinx, and Jinx is very popular. But, her early game is difficult because you don't have any heal. Your Q is just really wimpy damage, and you're very short range. So you can go up and harass them with your E, but it's only 650 range, which is very spooky against engaged champs and is going to allow other enchanters to trade back on you. But it's really just that scaling later on, your W, giving the movement speed, giving the attack speed, and being able to shield the ADC and effectively give them like 80 on-hit damage. And then your point-click R, just no questions asked, big infusion of health, gets around grievous wounds. Doesn't scale super well with AP, but you have enough scaling elsewhere in your kit. So I think she is really good. Now, watch out for her next patch. It's totally possible that she could be S tier next patch because we'll see. I'll have to see what the final numbers are, but it's looking like they're trying to make on-hit champions potentially a lot better with some of the Ginsus. Blade of the Ruined King, Kraken is not mythic anymore, so you might see people going like Ginsu Kraken, which I guess you can do right now. But look out, because that looks like one of the things that might be really buffed, and she's extremely good with those Ginsu champs because you get so much extra attack speed and so many extra attacks. Now, Ginsu's doesn't trigger your picks twice because it's on attack, not on hit. But the fact that you have so much attack speed and champions like that are going to be building so much attack speed can make that potentially really strong. Okay, and then the last few here, because I don't want this video to be too terribly long. We've got Yuumi. She's okay. I mean, I think her win rate is good. If you're with a really solid ADC, she's all right. God, if you were there on stream, though, we were up, like, I don't even know, 10K or something in this one game where I played Yuumi, and I was, like, 2-2 and 25, or just some crazy numbers. We were up, like, 15 kills, and we end up throwing the game. As people just weren't grouping. I was telling them to group. They were trying to split push, and I know people are going to say, well, that can happen in any game. That happens all the time. But if you get good on engaged champs, that does not happen all the time, if you know what you're doing, because you can force action. You get vision. Yumi's probably the worst support in the game at vision because you don't even have boots most of the time. You have to have someone go with you everywhere, and good luck, with that in silver, having people help you with vision. But you're just, if you don't get good vision control, if you don't have a way to force a fight, games are going to go longer a lot of times. Going to be, instead of 25, 30-minute games, you're going to get 30, 45, maybe not 45, 30, 35, 40-minute games. And that means if someone's just out of position and gets caught by the enemy and they just happen to get, one good ace on you, they could win the game. Or they could get Baron, and that can snowball them back into the game if they have, like, bounties and all that kind of stuff. So that's pretty much what happened. Was I was pinging to do stuff, but I couldn't do it myself. We had people that just weren't listening, and I could not get good vision control, and people just got caught several times. They stopped our dragon stacking, grabbed a Baron, and then just eventually pushed and won the game. And I just feel like you're at your teammates' mercy if you play Enchanters, and Yumi's probably the biggest one. Yes, she does give a lot of stats. Yes, in team fights, that ultimate can be really powerful, but your team has to position well and not take dumb fights. And I just feel like it's a lot easier to have lower stats but be able to force good fights than it is to have better stats and not be able to take good fights. Because a lot of times, like, it doesn't matter what your stats are, how much AP you have on a lot of these champs. If they get caught, so many fights are determined by who gets the first catch, right? Who gets blown up instantly for checking a bush they shouldn't check, and then it's a 4v5 and everyone else gets run down and killed. Like, It feels like that's 90% of the fights. I mean, how often is it a clean 5v5, everybody's just staring everybody down, and it's just a neat fight. Even then, you're counting on your team to position well, to not get caught out. You know, you're counting on that Vayne to not tumble forward. Your Ezreal to E forward or whatever. That's just a lot of ifs. I would rather take those questions off the table, make it very obvious what your team needs to do, get a good engage, get a pick, and then go from there. So, anyways, Yuumi, stats, very strong, very compelling, looks really OP if she's on a good team where people are making good choices, but I feel like a lot of times it's a high risk of inconsistency. Now, if you duo with someone who's like a good quality ADC, you know, that helps a lot, but the rest of it can be rough. Soraka, like, pretty good at trading early on, very vulnerable to engages, has virtually no mobility as far as, like, rotating between fights. She does get some extra movement if someone's low on health, but not a lot of reliable mobility. And I would just rather be playing something like Sona most of the time, at least right now. We'll see. Next patch. Senna, I could definitely see an argument for Senna being A tier. She does have good harassment early. They did give her some buffs a few patches ago. Her win rate has been trending up. So she does scale really well if you want the AP option, or the AD option on your team, rather. Umbral is an amazing item. Very good for vision control. So she has that, but she is somewhat vulnerable to getting picked off if you try to go for vision yourself. So she's okay. Lux, really good poke early. Decent vision control for a non-tank later on. You've got your E to check bushes. Now, if you do get flanked, you're going to die probably. You do have your bind. You have your E that you can slow them down with. So, again, she's better than most. I could definitely see an argument for her being tier 2, especially in, like, gold and lower. Doesn't scale particularly well. Needs a lot of items. Doesn't have any, like, plants or, like, percentage-based damage, pets, that type of stuff. But a 2-second bind is really nice, so you can kind of engage pretty comfortably on her, at least easier than you can with Zyra and Brand. So you can punish people out of bushes with her, so pretty decent. And then that's it for the most part that I'll talk about, because again, I want this to be shorter. Nami, still good with Lucian. Rel, if you practice a lot, she can be good. Great in certain matchups, really good against Rakan. Bard, I want him to be good, but he is short range, and it's very easy for a lot of people to dodge your ultimate, especially in the Gale Force era that we're in right now, so that's kind of rough. Renata Glass can be good peeler, okay harassment early on, very vulnerable to flanks and getting blown up, but if you have a fed person, you just want to protect him, she's good. I'd prefer her over Zillion in a lot of matchups. Pyke, if you snowball really hard, he looks really good. If not, then he feels pretty worthless. And that's pretty much it. So thank you very much for tuning in. As always, I appreciate it. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? Which champions are you finding success on a lot here? What do you think is pretty strong? What do you think might be good next patch? And that's it. Have a good day. I'll see you next time.